Good afternoon, my dear students, beloved candidates, meritorious examinees. It gives me great pleasure to meet you online on this occasion to run this online session relating to the subject English and the chapter entitled Two Gentlemen of Verona. The lesson Two Gentlemen of Verona was written by A.J. Cronin, Archibald Joseph Cronin. Archibald Joseph Cronin was a Scottish physician and novelist. So, by profession, he is an eminent doctor, that is, a general practitioner. So, after a while, he took interest in writing, and he becomes a world famous author. So, A.J. Cronin is the author of the lesson Two Gentlemen of Verona. So, he was born on 16th July 1896 at Cordros in Dumbletonshire in Scotland, and he died on 6th January 1981 at Montreux in Switzerland. So his literary works represent realism in contrast with social criticism. So his literary works won a large Anglo-American readership. So his world famous, prominent and dominant literary works are Hatter's Castle and The Spanish Gardener. So by writing these great literary works, by producing these great literary works, he becomes a remarkable, incredible writers in the world. So what happens here? So he was, as you know, he was a Scottish novelist and physician. So he went on writing and producing the lesson entitled The Gentleman of Verona, parallel to what William Shakespeare had written. So this is an epithet, stands, represents, or it is referred to two brothers, so were in their teenage or in their adolescent age, so who were young, energetic and robust in their business undertakings. So as we say, work is worship. So work is worthwhile. It is a hard work that brings us success. It is a laborious work that brings us victory. So that the lesson Two Gentlemen of Verona gives us that importance and significance. So coming back to the lesson, so the author, who in the lesson referred to as the narrator, the author or the narrator along with his companion, so were driving through the foothills of Alps. Alps is one of the largest mountainous range in Europe, and the Alps are one of the largest mountainous ranges in the world, like our own Himalayas. So what happened when they were driving through the foothills of the Alps? So two small boys stopped them on the outskirts of Verona. So why did they stop them? They stopped them to sell their fruits to the narrator and his companion, and the car driven by the driver named Yugi. So when they approached the car, the driver Yugi doesn't like to buy fruits from them, as they were selling the wild strawberries. bright scarlet berries, so which looked fresh, ripe, and delicious, as we say, emmy fruits. So they were packed in a wicker basket, so with along with dark green leaves. So this attracted the narrator and his companion. So they wanted to go in for purchasing these fruits from them, but the cart driver objected and he cautioned them not to buy fruits from those boys, as they are going to get fruit much better in the town. So the cart driver also shrugged his shoulders to convey his disapproval of their shabby appearance. So this shabby appearance stands for their filthy and dirty clothes, and they were seen, okay, wearing worn and torn clothes. So, but the narrator and his companion would not listen to the cart driver, so they went on observing their business activities. So they were very much attracted by their remarkable demeanor. So what happened? So one of the boys was wearing a worn jersey with cut short pants. The other boy was wearing a shortened army tunic gathered in loose folds about his skinny frame. So that skinny frame means he looked thin and slim, but he doesn't have a stout and hefty body. So the narrator and his companion kept gazing at these two little figures. So they were very much attracted with their remarkable demeanor. So their brown complexioned skin, their tangled hair, and dark earnest eyes. So this attracted them very strongly and strangely towards them. So finally they decided to buy their fruits. So they bought one of the biggest baskets from them. After buying the biggest baskets from them, so they stepped towards the town. So that town is Verona. Verona is one of the historical and mythological towns in Italy. Okay, so the Verona, flourished, a town that flourished in ancient times, also flourished in medieval times, because it has the quiet medieval roads and transformed to modern times and becomes one of the modern times in the present world. So the town has splendid and spectacular buildings, modest cottages, painted exquisitely with pale honey color, and it is believed and imagined. So Romeo and Juliet were reputed to have lived in this city, so where one can find the historical tombs like Nini's tomb and Juliet's tomb, so that hundreds and thousands of visitors, foreign tourists, so throng this town, and they make regular visits to this town. So what happened here in the recent bombings, bombed in recent times by the elite German commandos, that is the Nazi army, what we call as brown shirts. So most of the town's spacious and architectural bridges were destroyed, but the town retains its gaiety or charm. So the town still remains to be so charming, fantastic, and fascinating for the visitors and the tourists. So that is in brief about the town Verona. So on the next day, as usual, the narrator and his companion came out of their hotel or inn. So inn, inn, that means a hotel, a grand hotel. So they drove for some distance. After driving for some distance, so for their surprise, they came to know two young, energetic and robust boys bending over their shoe shining boxes beside the fountain in the public square, briskly undertaking their shoe shining work. So, seeing these two boys again beside the fountain in the public square, the narrator and his companion realized that they were the two great good friends they had met on the previous day on the outskirts of Verona. So they kept looking at their brisk work, so they did not want to disturb them. They did not want to all of a sudden intervene. So after the trade slackened, trade got reduced or declined. So narrator and his companion went towards them. So no sooner Nicola and Jacobo saw the narrator and his companion, then they greeted them with their cheerful and friendly faces. So this created a great impression on the minds of the narrator and his companion. So the narrator taking interest. So eventually he asks Nicola, he tells Nicola that they were running the fruit selling business for living. But Nicola responded and reiterated that they do many things for their living, for their sustenance, for the sake of raising more profits. And he also told them that they conduct rounds for the tourists, the foreign tourists, they act as guides for the foreign tourists, and they also take the visitors and tourists to Juliet's tomb. So listening to this, so the narrator asks Nicola and Jacobo to take him rounds around the city, so to visit the historical and mythological centers. So after making several rounds, so what happens? So the author questions him. So the author's interest was again provoked by their remarkable demeanor. So the gives the author tells him so that they're running, though they were childish, in many ways they are artless. So Jacobo, though his lips were paler than they should have been, he was lively as a squirrel. Nicholas' smile was steady and engaging. So yet in those boyish faces there was seriousness, one respected, an air of purpose far beyond their years. So as the week went by, as the week passed by, so these boys became very useful to the narrator and his companion. So if they wanted the pack of American cigarettes, seats for the opera, or a good restaurant that could provide good ravioli, or the Italian pasta stuffed with meat and cheese, so Nicola and Jacobo were relied upon to satisfy their needs with usual cheerful competence. So what struck one most was their unremitting willingness to work. So they never showed their disinterestedness in works. So they were ready to render their services at any time, at any cost, and they were rendering their services, doing their trade, running their errands around the clock. So what happens here when They were of great help to the tourists and visitors coming to Verona. So, what did they do? They kept doing their business. So, during those summer days under the hot sun, or during those long evenings when the chill wind blew, when the chill wind blew from the mountains, so they did not stop working. They kept doing their work. They shined shoes. They ran errands. They ran errands. They sold fruit. They booked tickets for the opera. They conducted rounds for the tourists acting as the guides. They hawked newspapers and they bought American cigarettes and marketed them, and they exploited every avenue which the troubled economy of the town left open for them. So, in this way, they were successful in their undertakings, so which very much pleased the narrator and his companion. So, these works, activities went on, okay, continuously, constantly, and instantly. So, they could do their works consistently. So, whenever their services are needed, so the narrator and his companion used to utilize their services. So this made the narrator feel very happy, contented, and convinced with their odd and odious works. So on one night, the next day, when the narrator came out, okay, just to have a stroll in the city square, so he felt not only surprised but also shocked to see the two boys resting on the stone pavement. So where Nicola sat upright, a bundle of newspapers, unsold newspapers, lay at his feet, while his brother while Jacobo pillowed his brother's shoulder and was asleep. So Nicola was alert, and he was with a mood of hawking the newspapers. So the narrator asked him, so what do they do at this time and juncture? At this haunting and daunting time, it was almost midnight. So Nicola tells him that they were not complaining. So it is their routine work. So they are able, stable, and capable of running their businesses around the clock. So he also reveals and discloses that they were waiting for the last bus to come from Padua. So when the bus arrives, they are going to sell all their newspapers to the incoming passengers or commuters. So this made the narrator to feel happy and convinced. So as usual, he goes back to his hotel. So the next day, taking interest in these two boys' activities, he comes to the city square. So where usually Nicola and his brother sit and do shoe shining works. So after getting his shoes shined, so the narrator asks him, what do they do with lot of money that they make, that they earn? So with lot of profits that they are getting by running so many works, so many profitable works. So Nicola was not able to answer this question. He could not respond all of a sudden. So the narrator went on informing that so they raise lot of profits from running errands, but they are not spending on their clothes, as they still remain in their rags, wearing filthy and dirty clothes. Besides, they are not spending on better foodstuffs, So they were seen eating always the black bread and pigs. So this made Nicola to feel disgusted, dismayed, and he was filled with some sort of this one despair. Okay, so dissatisfied with this question, he was not able to answer the narrator's question. So the narrator went on asking him whether they are planning, whether they are interested to go emigrate to America. So Nicola tells him, so that was a great thing. They would like to go to America, but they did not have that idea at present, and they have their own plans. When the narrator heard Nicola telling they have their own plans, so the narrator asked him what their plans were. But Nicola would not like to tell anything or reveal anything or disclose anything about their plans. So he keeps looking sideways, filled with despair, losing his hope, but he remains silent and gives some unrelated answer, some irrelevant answers. So meanwhile, hearing to the narrator telling that they are going to leave Verona on Monday, and before leaving, the narrator asked him if he would be of any help to them. So he was ready to help them in whatever way or manner they preferred. So Nicholas says that he would not like to disturb or trouble anybody. But Jacobo was keeping silent for a while, so opens up his mouth and interposes and tells the narrator that so every week they go to the country in Foleta. So they used to hire bicycles to travel a distance of 30 kilometers from the city square to Padua or Foleta. So he feels that the narrator was kind enough so that he would send them in car this Sunday to go to Foleta. So convinced with this question, the narrator tells him he was ready to send them in his car, but the driver Luigi was given off. He was given this Sunday off, but he is ready to drive them himself in his car to Foleta. So listening to this, Nicola was so much dissatisfied, and he would not like to depend on others, would not give trouble to others. So he looked glares at his brother with vexation or feeling annoyed. So meanwhile, the narrator intervenes and tells it is of no disturbance or trouble. So after thinking for a while, feeling disgusted, feeling dissatisfied, so Nicola gives his approval, tells him, very well, sir. So listening to this approval, so the narrator would like to help them going to Foleta in his own car to be driven by himself. So as usual, the next day on Sunday, so they started their journey towards Foleta. So before starting their journey, so these boys requested the narrator not to ask anything about their secrets or their plans. So they would not like to reveal anything about their personal things. So while traveling, they might have been talking some other matters, unrelated matters. So after reaching Foleta, so what happens? So they request the narrator to stay put for some time or to wait for them for a maximum time of 1 hour. So when they reach Foleta, these two boys without asking him to follow them or without asking the narrator to accompany them. They jumped off the car like days and ran into a building, and that building is a hospital where their sister was hospitalized. So that is Lucia, who is aged about 20 years. So what happened in the earlier times? They were leading a comfortable and luxurious life. So in the war-torn region, so in the very early age, they had lost their mother. In the initial stages of the war, his father was killed in the war. His father was taking care of the children. They were leading a happy life. He was a singer at La Scala, and they were well taken care of. And when the city was widely bombed, so they lost their residence. It was destroyed. Their house was destroyed, and they were living in a makeshift house for a long time. So during those long days of winter, so irresistible with the bad weather, their sister Lucia was aged about 20 years, contracted a chronic disease, that is tuberculosis of the spine, so which could prove fatal on her life. So she was by profession a singer, so she was earning for their family and taking care of her brothers. When she became a patient suffering from a chronic disease, that is tuberculosis, she was hospitalized, and there in the hospital they had to pay the medical bills every week, and that's why these two brothers